All right, get ready because we're diving deep into some ancient wisdom, stuff that's surprisingly relevant to your life today. We're cracking open the book of First Samuel, specifically chapter 2. It's this really cool mix of powerful prayer, stark warnings, and a timeless story of, well, corruption and faith.
What I think is so interesting about this chapter is that it's not just some historical account. It gives us these really profound insights into human nature, into the consequences of our choices. And, these themes resonate today just as strongly as they did thousands of years ago.
Okay, so let's unpack this thing.
Right.
Starting with Hannah, she's barren for years, desperately wants a child, and makes this heartfelt vow to God. Then, bam, her prayer is answered and she has Samuel. But her prayer of gratitude after that, it's not just about her son, right?
Not at all. Hannah's prayer, it's a powerful expression of how she understands God's character. She praises his justice, his power to uplift the humble and bring down the arrogant. This concept of reversal of fortune is central to her prayer, and it offers a profound insight into how she sees the world working.
It's like she's acknowledging that life has these constant ups and downs. And sometimes those who seem to have it all, they can fall. While those who are struggling can be lifted up. It's a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
Exactly. And this idea of reversal of fortune, it's not just an ancient concept. We see it play out all the time in our own lives, in our careers, our relationships, even in global events. It's a reminder to stay humble, to recognize that things can change quickly.
Now, in stark contrast to Hannah's deep faith, we have Eli, the high priest, and his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They're in this position of power and authority, but they're not exactly living up to the job description, are they?
No, their actions were considered really offensive because they violated these sacred rituals and they exploited their position for personal gain. Imagine a public official today openly using their office to enrich themselves while disregarding the needs of the people they're supposed to serve. That's the level of transgression we're talking about.
And it's not just that they're taking advantage of the system. They're literally taking the best parts of the sacrifices meant for God, before the fat was even burned. That's pretty blatant disregard for the religious laws, right?
Absolutely. Their actions weren't just corrupt, they were sacrilegious. It's a reminder that true leadership, it isn't about personal gain or privilege. It's about service, respect, and upholding the values of the community you represent.
So basically, their actions were a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and the consequences were swift and severe. The people lose trust in their leadership. And ultimately, Eli's family faces divine judgment. They lose their priestly position because he failed to hold his sons accountable.
That makes you wonder, was he blinded by his love for his sons? Or did he just choose to ignore their behavior because it was easier than confronting them?
Well,
Either way, his inaction had a ripple effect, not just on his family, but on the entire community.
that's a powerful lesson for leaders in any era, isn't it? Sometimes the hardest choices, they're the ones that uphold integrity and accountability, even when it involves those closest to us.
This is where young Samuel steps into the picture. And it's fascinating how he grows up witnessing all this corruption firsthand, yet chooses a completely different path.
Yeah, it really highlights the power of individual choice, doesn't it? Samuel, he's surrounded by this moral decay, yet he chooses integrity. He doesn't just avoid the pitfalls. He actively chooses to serve God faithfully.
It's almost like he's this beacon of hope amidst all the darkness, a living example that even when we're surrounded by negativity, we can choose a different path. But his story, it raises an interesting question. What do you think enables him to resist those negative influences? Is it just, I don't know, his inherent goodness, or is it something more?
That's a great question. I think it speaks to the importance of mentorship
Hmm.
and early guidance. I mean, Samuel's mother dedicated him to God's service from when he was really young. And he was raised in the tabernacle, surrounded by all these spiritual practices and teaching.
But his environment, even with all its problems, it still played a part in shaping who he became.
Precisely. It suggests that even in these imperfect systems, individuals, they can find sources of inspiration and guidance to help them develop a strong moral compass. And it also shows the responsibility that people in positions of authority have to create environments that foster integrity and discourage corruption.
And speaking of responsibility, let's talk about that prophecy. A man of God appears and delivers this message to Eli, warning him that his family is going to lose its power because of their actions. God's going to raise up a new, faithful priest. So it's not just about individual consequences, is it?
No, it's about the far-reaching impact of leadership, both the good and the bad. The prophecy, it goes beyond this single family. It speaks to the idea that corrupt leadership, it erodes trust and ultimately leads to the downfall of entire systems.
But on the other hand, it also suggests that God is actively working to restore justice. and raise up leaders who will serve with integrity.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the systems we have in our world, the ones that seem corrupt or broken. I mean, whether it's in government, business, even religious institutions, we see examples of people abusing their power.
Hmm.
And it can feel really disheartening. So is the message here that those systems are just destined to fail?
I don't think it's about predicting failure. It's more about understanding that actions have consequences. When systems are built on corruption, well, they become unstable. But this story offers hope, too. It reminds us that change is possible, that even in the darkest times, there's a possibility for renewal and restoration.
That's a pretty powerful message, especially when we look around at the state of things today. But it's one thing to talk about these ancient principles. It's another to actually apply them to our modern lives. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we take these lessons from 1 Samuel and use them for our own challenges and
Yeah,
decisions?
that's the big question, isn't it? We've uncovered all these profound themes: gratitude, corruption, integrity, and that little glimmer of hope for a better future. But how do we actually translate these ancient principles into action today in our modern lives?
I think it's about recognizing that these aren't just some abstract concepts. They're timeless principles that really speak to the core of human experience.
Hmm.
Like Hannah's prayer, it's not just a beautiful piece of poetry, it's a model for how we can cultivate gratitude in our own lives, even when things are tough.
Yeah, it's like she's showing us how to shift our focus, to see the good even when things are hard. It's not about ignoring the bad stuff. It's about choosing to see the bigger picture and finding reasons to be thankful. Right, and that shift in perspective, it can have a big impact on how we approach, well, everything else. When we're rooted in gratitude, we're less likely to get caught up in that feeling of entitlement and greed. That ultimately led to, Eli's son's downfall.
Speaking of Eli's sons, their story is a pretty stark reminder that leadership comes with responsibility. And it's not just about people in official positions of power. It's about how we all influence others in all parts of our lives.
Exactly. Whether we're leading a team at work, guiding our families, or just interacting with our community, we have the chance to embody those principles of integrity, accountability, and service. The ones that Eli's sons were really lacking.
And then there's Samuel, showing us that even when you're surrounded by bad stuff, we can still choose a path of integrity. It's inspiring. But it also makes you wonder, is it all about just willpower? Or are there things we can do to actually create environments that make it easier to choose what's right?
That's such an important point. While individual choice is super important, we can't forget about the influence our surroundings have on us. We can all play a role in building systems and cultures that, promote ethical behavior, whether it's advocating for more transparency in our workplaces or simply modeling integrity in our everyday interactions.
So what I'm hearing is, it's not just about reading these stories and thinking, oh, that's nice. It's about taking those principles and actually making them part of our lives, our relationships, and the systems we're a part of.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is, even small actions that are inspired by these ancient principles can have a huge impact. They can create positive change that goes way beyond just ourselves.
That's a pretty powerful thought to end on. It reminds us that we all have the ability to be agents of change, to bring those timeless values of gratitude, integrity, and accountability into the 21st century. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.